Hello, everybody. Andy Jacob here with the .com magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series and Business Spotlight. I mean, I have a great show today. You watch the show all the time. You know that we love the energy space. I mean, it's such an important space. Everybody's talking about it, whether, you're talking worldwide energy, United States energy, how we're going to get enough energy to all the people throughout the world in a meaningful way that is efficient. And when we heard what Miss Kimberly Johnston is doing at, of course, NextGen Energy, don't you love that name? We talk about branding. That's a great name as well. Next Generation Energy, but in her case, it's NextGen Energy Partners. They're really transforming the way we think about energy. So when we heard what she's doing, it's very innovative, it's very new, it's very exciting. We wanted to bring Kimberly on the show. So Kimberly, welcome to the .com magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series.
A pleasure to be here, Andy, and delighted and looking forward to an engaging conversation on next-gen energy.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I mean, you're right in the middle of it. Everybody's talking about it. I mean, whether you're talking about United States energy, overseas, a combination, Latin America, Canada, Europe, but the United States itself, I mean, when we think about energy, we have everyone talking about it, whether it's technologists talking about AI and driving energy, or how we're going to fund energy, how we're going to be efficient in energy, how we're going to transform the whole idea and thought about energy, which is why we brought you on the show. So before we get started, I have so many questions. Let's pull the lens back to 30,000 feet. Tell us about NextGen Energy, and then we're going to get to it.
Sure. And just as you put forth the landscape, Andy, it is front and center on a global stage, on a U.S. stage. We continually see long duration power outages and these impacts that continue to rise. And so when you think about energy, it's a transition and it's highly complex, and it requires a lot of engaging different stakeholders and their perspectives. So what NextGen Energy Partner does is we're a highly specialized firm, and with deep experts, probably experts that have 3 decades or more in this energy sector, across the value chain, across the complexities, really focused on bringing those experts together along with government, academia, the investors, the innovators, bringing them all together to decide how are we going to have a responsible pathway in this energy transition that doesn't leave anybody behind, that really deploys that capital in a meaningful way. And it's just not an isolation of one metric. It's a balanced scorecard. And so that's what we're really focused on here at NextGen Energy Partners.
Yeah, I love it, Kimberly. There's a lot of talk these days about waste and inefficiencies. And in your particular case, your whole goal is to bring efficiency to the marketplace, to bring all these experts together to really transform not only the energy sector, but the way in which efficiency really rules the day. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. Efficiency. So when I think about efficiency, it's not only how it's making sure that for every dollar deployed is maximizing its outcomes. And when you think about maximizing the outcomes, what are the jobs it's creating? What about the global competitiveness? How is it really keeping the lights on during these natural disasters? How is it reducing greenhouse gas emissions? And thinking about the whole value proposition and the whole cost approach rather than in isolation. And that's where I think we get down to a really slippery slope, is when we go right to solutions in very narrow, think about only carbon reduction targets or only profitability. You have to look through this multidimensional lens to gain those efficiencies across the board. Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes sense. And of course, we talk about AI all the time. We've had some of the worldwide leading experts in AI on the show. What a lot of people now know is that AI has a big thirst for energy. I mean, they're talking about building nuclear power plants to sort of serve up the AI and sort of bridge the gap of energy to AI so they have enough energy. For the people watching the show, do we have enough energy? What does the future look like? And how does NextGen Energy sort of think about the future of energy?
Sure. Well, so when I think about energy, it's going to be gigawatts. I call it gigawatt America or gigawatt globe, because if you look, any outlook would say probably 5x electricity demand anticipated in the next decade or so. Okay, we have this huge uptake of data centers, right? Which are, gigawatt users of data. And so when you think about that hockey stick curve of demand growth, we also have it happening at the same time. We have governments across the world under the Paris Agreement have had said, we're making a net zero economy commitment by 2050. And then even more granular than that, in the US, they have said they're going to have a carbon-free electric grid by 2035. And then many states and cities, about 80 different entities across the US have also adopted aggressive decarbonization. So you have this ramp up in demand, you have this acceleration of decarbonization targets. At the same time, you have the US hit by these natural disasters. Okay, on average, since 1980, we have about 20 events that hit a year. Each of those events are about 125 billion. One event costs 125 billion. Since 1980, the total cost of these disasters just in the US alone is almost 2.8 trillion. Okay, so all this is converging all at once. And so you really need to think about the future. So if the future is carbon neutrality, you need to build something, first of all, the grid, because we all want these lights on. We all need heat. It's a life. Our economy, our livelihoods depend on it. So I just start there. Let's start thinking about a grid, monetizing that grid where it's always there to meet that demand. And then in a sustainable way, but also economic. We can't go to a carbon-free grid and increase our rates where it's unaffordable. People right now can't decide, do I pay my electric bill or do I go to the grocery store? That is not a situation we should be in the US, and we are, unfortunately, and a lot of countries are. So we want to think about alleviating the energy burden while we're wrapping up these technologies.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you bring together experts. I mean, you bring people together from the universities, you bring people together from the government, you bring people together from private industry. When you get together at NextGen and you sit at a table or do a Zoom call, what does that conversation sound like? Is everybody agreeing with what needs to happen? Are there a lot of disagreements on what needs to happen? And how does your company step in and make sure that this transformation takes place in a very smooth way?
Well, I think there's two things there. When you're doing this cross-sector collaboration, first, it's very important to listen and understand what is in it for them. Okay, everybody is going, how is this going to benefit academia? How is this going to benefit a company? But what we start with first is, what's the problem? What is the problem that all of you are facing in a shared problem? And we tend to advise at the state level. So if we go into a state and the problem is we have power insecurity, we continue to have long duration power outages, we need to solve this. And so then from there, everybody's on the same page. Everybody wants their lights on, right? That's hard. So you got the consensus where you get into more of the negotiations or more, I shouldn't say negotiations, it's really gaining alignment on how to solve the energy security challenges. It's okay, let's look at the viable solutions, the technologies that are de-risked. What are the technologies ready in our marketplace that are somewhat economically viable with some incentives that are reasonable, but will really drive the needle in reducing our power outages? And so that's where we start with, is just having everyone weigh in on those full array of solutions, technologies that would move the needle. And that's where we kind of get to a project that we're all ready to say, okay, this is the solution. Let's go ahead, pull our dollars together, and let's make a large scale pilot demonstration project. And let's, get this out to minimize the impact of these outages. That's one example.
Yeah, I love it. Of course, I have a very good friend who lives in Houston, and they got hit by the hurricanes and water up to the ceiling and all kinds of problems. And recently he had to kick on his Generac generator for a week or two, and he bought a big one for on top of his building, and then he shared it with all of his neighbors. I mean, he's a great guy. And I started thinking about it. I mean, energy we take for granted. You know, we turn on those switches, we turn on those lights, we have that hot water. You know, the lights come on, we get heat, we get air conditioning, but it's not something to take for granted, is it? I mean, it's very, very complex system that needs to be continually improved. And we don't want to have energy security challenges, not only for states and cities and municipalities, but the US government, from a security standpoint, doesn't want to have security challenges as well with their energy, right?
Absolutely. And I think so first of all, I applaud your friend, because when you have your on-site generation and you can share it with others, that's ideal. And our family personally, since Storm Uri, which was the Texas freeze of 2021, which is 3 years ago, we put a microgrid system on our home. We have avoided 70 power outages since that system was in play. And you're absolutely right. A freeze in Texas means your pipes bust in your ceiling and your house could be totaled. So it also weighs into insurance. And so that investment, there's a tipping point, right? Where people are going to, or companies that can afford it, will get their on-site generation. And the technology is there where they could actually get it carbon-free or very low carbon-free. But going back to your question on energy security, right? That's at a very individual level. We're kind of taking energy in our own hands. Well, we have to have a system approach. We have 3,000 utilities in this US. It's highly fragmented. It's highly complex. And right now, on the grid, we have about 60% from fossil fuel, which most of that is natural gas. Only 16% comes from coal, which is great. We've made a real movement from coal to natural gas. Natural gas is key because it's always there. We don't know when the wind's going to blow. We don't know when the sun's going to blow. So, but we have 40% of our power mix in the US that is carbon free, and that's half renewables and half nuclear. And with the breakthrough of advanced nuclear and energy storage, we really feel that we could achieve a carbon-free electric grid, over the next decade or two. And there's kind of consensus around that. And kind of that last 10% is going to be really difficult. But that's where I think it's this, when you think of the US and energy security, you have to think of a balanced approach. You need the fossil fuel as well as the carbon-free, because it's called the transition for a reason. And just like if you go all electric in your home, you may want to keep that gas operating car to evacuate, right? So you just want to have all the levers there to make
Yeah,
sure.
that's a great point. I mean, I never thought about it. So you have, if all the electric cars, everything's electric, and all of a sudden the grid goes down and you have an electric car, you need to evacuate. You got a problem. I never even thought about that, Kimberly. That's wild.
Yes. So we're all electric here. We're both energy in Houston, and because we're trying to test this and understand what it means to go all electric. And when these storms come in, there is warning, fortunately, for the Gulf Coast. There is not warning when you're dealing with the North West with wildfires. So it all depends on your lag time, right? But in our case, we know maybe we get 5-day warning. So we go and charge up our cars. Our cars on one full charge could take us all the way to Oklahoma City. And we wouldn't have to stand in those horrific gas lines like we had to when we had Rita hit after Katrina, right? We all saw the news around New Orleans underwater just overnight from Katrina, and Rita hit right after that. So an ICE vehicle was very problematic too, because you're standing in line. So it is things you have to think about. And then there's always the electric infrastructure for transportation has to be also very well thought of, and how you use those cars that have that storage capability. Maybe that's the backup generator from your home as well. And you have that sharing arrangement with your neighbors.
Yeah, very interesting. Of course, NextGen Energy doing a lot of good work. You've got some initiatives that are on tap that are coming up. We're going to bring you back on the show for a business update when those happen. But let's talk about monetization. So how does NextGen Energy earn its money? Where does the money come from in the business model?
So in the business, I'm a retired Big Four consulting partner. So and as I shared earlier, NextGen Energy is a boutique consulting firm. So we do get paid based on our expertise, and how we're getting paid is through consulting or advisory contracts with those entities. The consortium members may pay us, the states may pay us. But it is a very discounted rate. And the reason I want to emphasize that, because in this energy transition, everybody has to kind of make an investment. Okay, it's new. It's never been done before. And so I could certainly have stayed at my very nice Big Four and been very well, but I decided I need to use my expertise to really guide and shape, and whatever I can do as an individual, I'll feel better about myself. And so that's how we make money. But we also, to stretch the monetization, we form strategic alliances. It's very important. We do not feel, this energy transition is so impactful to everyone. Let's all come together who's willing to solve these problems collectively. So we're not like operating in your traditional competitive marketplace. We're more like, let's come together and solve this together. There's a place and monetization for everyone involved.
Yeah, I love it. It's really interesting. Who reaches out? Who's the first one that reaches out? Is it the government that says, hey, Kimberly, we need some help? Is it somebody from academia that says, hey, we want to connect? What's that first conversation sound like in the consulting firm when somebody reaches out to you? Who typically is the first organization or type of organization to reach out to NextGen Energy and say, hey, Kimberly, we need some help?
Yeah, I would say it's probably three flavors. It's the government entities themselves, and then the technology companies, because the technology companies, they want to enter this marketplace. It's heavily regulated. What's their entry port in this market? How do they get their technologies to elevate to be those ones that are deployed as pilots and demonstration projects? And then the third is academia, and those are universities that have energy centers of excellence, and they are reaching out to say, Kimberly, do you mind maybe serving in a voluntary capacity on the advisory board? And absolutely. So there's a lot of maybe in kind in the beginning to then really demonstrate or not demonstrate, but really see where the opportunity and a good fit for that academia partner and NextGen Energies to kind of go in and solve a problem together.
Wow, so interesting. Of course, we know that places like Arizona, it's so hot, they have water problems, and California has grid problems. And then you've got where you're at down in Texas, there's hurricane problems. And then we've got tornado problems. And then there's all kinds of problems, freezing problems. What area of the country, when you look at it, is there one area or one state that you say to yourself, wow, they really need to transform and transition, maybe even at a faster level than some of the other states in the United States?
So each state is really so uniquely positioned and challenged in this area. But when I look to kind of the early adopters that are really saying, hey, we're going to come together, we actually have, California's always been kind of leading in the renewable space, right? So they're kind of there. Illinois is another one because they have that alignment. But then there is Louisiana, and Utah. And from my personal perspective, I think Louisiana, because they are one of the top states with the most power outages in any given year. And they're really trying to tackle the power insecurity challenge very thoughtfully. And they have been as a first mover, really led some transformative, innovative projects. One, for instance, is called Louisiana Hubs for Energy Resilient Operations, Louisiana Hero. It was one of the largest Department of Energy awards granted under the bipartisan infrastructure law. But what's unique about that award, it's $250 million of a DOE award matched by investors by $250 million. So it's a co-investment. Both the public and private sector are going. And the goal is to deploy 385 microgrids on mission critical assets that need to be there to serve communities that are hit the hardest in these natural disasters. And you can orchestrate all these assets as a virtual power plant. It's kind of an up and coming, kind of emerging topic, but these microgrids orchestrate in coordination with the existing electric grid. So again, you're optimizing the current infrastructure and then elevating and thinking differently about bringing in these new technologies.
Wow. If you're from Louisiana and you're watching the show and you're tired of all those outages and you know somebody, have them reach out to Kimberly. I mean, this is unbelievable. I didn't know Louisiana led the way for these types of outages, but it does make a lot of sense with what's going on there. But again, very positive news, Kimberly. You're telling me that some states are doing very, very good jobs. Some people are starting to adapt. Some states are starting to transform. Some states are starting to transition, and they're looking at their energy security challenges in a very, very insightful and powerful way. And they definitely need experts around them to help them make the right decisions and sort of get through the waves, I guess you could call it. Not the hurricane waves, just the waves of what you need to know. This has been a great interview. Before I let you go, I want to talk about entrepreneurship, because we do have younger entrepreneurs that watch the show. Maybe they're starting in startup mode. Maybe they've got a new business and maybe they're having a tough time. Maybe they're freezing in the frame a little bit. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to pivot. Based on your experience, your consulting background, what can you share with the younger entrepreneurs, Kimberly, about keep on going when times get tough?
I would say really, really define your purpose and values. So for us, our purpose is really to accelerate pathways to a carbon neutral energy system. Very simple. It's a big, big goal, but if anything comes our way that doesn't really meet that purpose, then it's not worth our time. Another thing is the values. So we say, okay, what does that mean from a value perspective? Well, value perspective means that we want to make sure that we are driving societal prosperity, job creation, high quality paying jobs, global competitiveness in this space, right? We want US to lead. I mean, and then power security, right? So I think really honing in on your purpose and values, and just because you're going to pivot, but just sometimes as we all know as entrepreneurs, you could be going down a lot of different rabbit holes because you get those investors, you get those alliances, and they may want to take it a different direction. The other thing is co-innovate with your customers. So many entrepreneurs, and I got into this, well, I want to really outline my website. I want to do this whole knowledge hubs thing. I want to volunteer and speak. Well, I'm much better at getting myself out there and co-innovating with my customers. And then they can start funding you in the project, so you're not having to raise capital or borrowing or taking out an equity on your home. So think differently about just co-innovating with your customers, and I think we all have, what is it called? Where you sabotage yourself, imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Just believe in yourself. Just do it, and then you'll pivot and have a great time with your customers, and you'll be on this wild, exciting ride, and it will all work out because your customers are right there working with you on the value proposition.
Wow. For the entrepreneurs watching the show, rewind what Kimberly just said. So insightful. Know your values, know your mission, understand where you're at. Don't veer from your core values. If you have a passion and you love what you're doing and you're working hard and something comes across your desk and it hits you wrong, it maybe doesn't hit your value system correctly, pass on it. Go with your internal gut oftentimes and listen to that as well as you can. Kimberly, this has been a great interview. I want to bring you back on the show when NextGen Energy Partners has some new initiatives to announce. I know you've got something on the drawing board. We can't talk about it yet. And thank you so much for coming on the .com Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today.
Absolutely a pleasure, Andy. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for viewing today. Appreciate it.